Vernadette Broyles, really an honor to have you in studio.
It is so nice to be here with you, Steve.
Thanks so much for joining us. So you're the president and general counsel of an organization called Child and Parental Rights Campaign. Talk to us about some of the most important work that you guys do.
Right. So our organization, we focus 100% on defeating the transgender ideological monster, whose goal is to drive a wedge between parents and their children so that various different arms of the government or of other private individuals can get control of children. And for the purpose of causing them to believe that they can be born in the wrong body and they need to change their body in order to satisfy this inner desire to be, the opposite sex. So we do several different things. We have a number of federal lawsuits against school districts that secretly transition children away from the biological sex and do so without disclosing information to the parents or even deceiving the parents or even at times overriding the parents' instructions, as if somehow a teacher or a school official knows your child better than you and has the right to raise your child behind your back. And then the other aspect of what we do is we also defend parents in juvenile courts against Child Protective Services that are investigating and taking custody away from parents who believe in biological reality and refuse to endorse the idea that their daughter is a boy that she's demanding to be treated as, and so therefore they're considered unsafe. We also represent a coach whistleblower on women's sports and spaces, but that's the third area of what we work on.
You actually have a high-profile client, Sage Blair. The president pointed her out in the State of the Union address. Talk to us about her case. She's, falls into that category of somebody who transitioned as a minor against, I don't know if you'd say it against her will, or certainly coaxed and guided in that direction.
Yes, coaxed and guided.
And what is her, talk to us about her sort of process of detransitioning and why that was so difficult.
Sure, so Sage had trauma in early life, and like so many of these girls, it set her up to be vulnerable to the false belief that her body was an enemy, her body was foreign and was to be rejected. And so when at about 14, she began to experience gender confusion. But you're absolutely right. The school counselors influenced her and encouraged, promoted this ideology, and even promoted the idea that your parents, they're not safe to talk about this. They're Christians. They're not safe. We're safe, but they're not. And so they cooperated, but they transitioned her at school socially, without disclosing to the parents. She ends up running away because she's being bullied and harassed, including in the boys' bathroom where she was encouraged to go. And when she ran away, she ran right into the arms of sex traffickers. She was multiply raped and trafficked over state lines. Now, when she was brought to Baltimore, Maryland, the police found her, but rather than giving her back to her parents to to take care of her, they put her into the system because they believed that the parents would not adequately affirm her male gender identity. And in the system, she is placed in a boys' facility. Well, what do you think happens to her in the boys' facility? She's further assaulted, and she's kept from her loving parents by the system for months. She ends up running away again, is sex trafficked more into Texas, and Texas has the sense to finally return her to Virginia to her parents. But it is a story of multiple trauma. This is what happens when you keep secrets from parents.
I want to unpack what you said about they put her into the system. This is essentially in multiple states throughout the country where children can be taken away from their parents for not affirming whatever gender they decide to be on any given day. Is that true? How many states is this happening in? And it sounds like Sage Blair is a product of that.
She absolutely is. She was emblematic of this, and it was so gratifying to see the president call it out and call out those politicians that are in favor of this. But absolutely right. I work with a number of other attorneys. There's a number of us that we receive these calls. And there are calls coming in from around the country. We are handling cases around the country, and I've personally handled several. I have a case that was out of California, Arizona. I have a case down in Massachusetts. There was one in Georgia, Oregon. The pattern, very common pattern, is secret transitioning in school, or a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist that is endorsing this ideology. Very often they're the ones that call then Child Protective Services on the parents. And the child begins, by the way, most of these children are being coached what to say. We have evidence in one of our cases of actual screenshots, Discord screenshots, where clearly an adult is communicating with this little girl, teenage girl, about what you need to say, what you need to do to get Child Protective Services to take you out of your home. And the goal is then to get into a home that will affirm this ideology or allow you to get these treatments. And it is happening around the country. We're not sure how much, because these are sealed courts and the parents are gagged. They cannot speak publicly. So I'm here to speak on their behalf.
So one argument that we often hear from the LGBT community is that this type of behavior, transitioning, is natural or biological, and you say that's just simply not the case and there's science to prove it.
Absolutely. Well, before becoming an attorney, I actually came out of a medical background, a biology background, and research. And I have read the research. There is zero evidence that there is a natural causation to this, that there's a natural biologically based etiology. There's no portion of the body, if I'm a female, there's no portion of my body that's male. The same XX chromosomes that design the rest of my body are the same XX chromosomes that design my brain. My brain is as female as my body. This is, and actually, there's not a single placebo-controlled clinical study that shows the effectiveness and the safety of these treatments. This is purely ideologically driven, and there's portions of the medical community that have been ideologically captured by this, that have been promoting these treatments. But we're finding more and more that many detransitioners are speaking out about how these treatments harm them.
And you say that there's two government instruments at play. One is the school, and one is, what would it be called in any given state? And how do those two forces sort of come together in this?
Right. You know, what I should have mentioned, there's actually an unholy trilogy. It starts many times with the internet, social media, Discord, TikTok. There's algorithms, just like there are algorithms that we now see that will pull children into suicidality or suicide pacts or other social contagions. There are powerful algorithms that will pull these, pubescent teenagers into a rabbit hole of transgender ideology, influencers. Many times we find out after the fact they've been up all night watching one YouTube after one reel after another, endorsing this belief system until it sinks in during a time of puberty, which is a time of change. It's a time of vulnerability. Young people are discovering themselves. So that's kind of the first arm. The second arm are schools, are public schools. Under the Obama and the Biden administration, it was federal education policy to require schools to embrace gender ideology and to affirm kids immediately when they rejected their sex. So you now have schools in all portions of the country. There are schools in Georgia, red state Georgia, where's our headquarters, that will quietly endorse and affirm a child's rejection of their sex. And so the second part of this is school officials somehow feeling that they know your child better than you, that they effectively are the parent, and will secretly transition kids, including secret changing closets, where kids will come to school and change into different clothing. They'll put on packers for females wanting to look like they're male, to act as if they have a fake penis. And in different ways affirming them at school while deceiving parents. They will call their child their legal name in front of the parents or their biological pronoun in front of the parents. But when the parents leave, they'll be treating them as if they're the opposite sex in order to deceive parents on purpose. So we have several federal lawsuits that we have brought against school districts, including one lawsuit that's still pending before the Supreme Court, hoping that the court will take. Also, there's that third arm, is the Child Protective Services, and forgive me, I neglected to share about that, and that's really important. We are seeing around the country, and there's a group of us allied attorneys that will get these calls. And I personally have tried several of these cases myself. I have a case right now. I just finished up a case, and I've got another one we just finished up in Georgia, and a case active in Massachusetts, where Child Protective Services are activated either by a school or a therapist or someone, and they will investigate and remove children from their home because you have a daughter, a girl, who's demanding to be treated as a boy, and the parents believe in biological reality and do not want to endorse that delusional thinking. And they will lose custody to Child Protective Services. And it's not just happening in blue states, it's rampant in Oregon and Massachusetts, Washington, and California. But I had a case in Arizona, I had a case in Georgia. There was a famous case in Indiana, so a case in Ohio that I had. So it's really happening in different parts of the country, and you don't hear about it so much because these courts are sealed records, and the parents are gagged. They literally cannot speak publicly about it, so I am.
It's also very complicated.
Very complicated.
To sort of distill, and I've heard of cases in Massachusetts where, a political conversation in a public Facebook group results in one member reporting falsely to the Child Protective Services about child abuse, and they show up and they take these threats very seriously. So once you invoke some of these agencies, it's really hard, even if it's not true, it's really a nefarious and insidious form of lawfare.
Absolutely. These are fit, loving parents. These are not drug abusive parents. These are not unstable. So, and it is a nightmare once the state has come into your home and has taken over.
And have you seen or heard of cases where the children that are taken away or separated from their parents actually wanted to be with them?
Most of the time, the child is radicalized, and so they literally want to divorce their parents, and they want new parents that will affirm this ideology. Almost all of the time, they have many other mental health comorbidities, and their mental health descends and decompensates while in the state's care, and they become more radicalized in this ideology. So often, most of the time, we see a complete rupture of the parent-child relationship and a destruction of that family. In Sage Bear's case, she actually wanted to come home at some point and had an activist lawyer that was keeping her away from her parents.
Wow. So how is this law used when parents try to advocate for their children?
Well, there's no particular law that says it's illegal to raise your child as their biological sex, but what they do is that they distort the existing laws on abuse and neglect, and they will say it's abusive to misgender your child. It is neglectful to not provide these treatments. And so it's kind of a distortion of existing law.
Interesting. Words matter in all of these discussions. Would you caution people to beware of the words?
Absolutely. This ideology does not exist in nature. This phenomenon is not naturally occurring. Just think about it. If every child is going to commit suicide, if they're not affirmed as their gender identity, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we weren't even aware of this. No one was affirming any of this. And we didn't have rampant suicide, okay? Our kids are more suicidal now in this woke culture that we have. I would say to people, this entire ideology is based on the perversion of words, of language. And so I say, all of us need to revolt against those who want to co-opt our mouth to cause us to to believe and to speak back a belief system that is not real. So I don't use any of the language, and I encourage us all to reject the language that gives false life to an ideology that is manufactured.
The president has taken this issue very seriously from the
Yes,
very
he has.
beginning, but we've seen instances of, although he's done multiple executive orders and different things, where the people at the front lines and universities are still perhaps not agreeing or following those. Is there anything being done to enforce and ensure that sort of the DEI and all of this sort of woke ideology is coming to a halt?
Yes, I mean, we have wonderful relationships with this administration, and I can tell you that there is a full court press to undo these ideologies from the federal level. You asked a little while ago a great question: what is at the core of this? Because you have to understand, people should not believe, oh well, my child is not gender confused, or in our church there's no gender confused children, so this doesn't affect me. No. There is a deeper purpose in all of this. That is to uncouple us from a fervent belief in biological reality, and to be able to force us to believe whatever powers in control want us to believe. All right? If they can cause us to believe a male's a female and a female can be a male, which is biologically impossible, they can take us anywhere. All right? And it's a agenda to drive a wedge between parents and their children. Why? In order to expose vulnerable young people, children, to be taken over by the government, to be tools of government ideology. That's straight out of the book of Mao. That is a Marxist agenda, which is to take over the next generation and remove them from the belief system of their parents and the protective covering of their parents, because now these children are available to government entities for the ideology that is orthodoxy in that governmental system.
I want to touch on women's sports. This is an area where we've seen a lot of attention. What remains to be the biggest battle?
In women's sports, it is to see coaches come out with courage. It amazes me. We represent former coach of the women's volleyball team for San Jose State University, Melissa Beatty-Smoos. She was the very courageous coach that blew the whistle on a male being on the women's volleyball team, at the collegiate level at San Jose State. That was big news a couple of years ago, because there were women's teams that were throwing the matches and taking losses, which should never be happening. She is only one of two coaches that I know that have stepped out courageously on behalf of women. How many collegiate coaches do we have across the country? We just need to see more people being willing, whether it's presidents of universities or coaches, more people in authority willing to step out and say, the emperor has no clothes. A male should never be competing on a women's team. That's unfair to the women, nor should he ever be in where they're showering, they're undressing. That's sexual harassment. And that's probably an area that we need to see more of.
Vernadette Broyles, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
My pleasure to be here.